Hello there, internet world. Today on Salonpreneur magazine, the podcast, I'm joined by the lovely Philippa Holding, and we're talking about the autumn edition of Salonpreneur. It's the second edition, and within it, we have a whole feature about Black History Month, celebrating and embracing women pioneers of this industry that have made their mark. And Philippa wrote a wonderful article all about Sarah Breedlove. And lessons from Sarah Breedlove, the first Black self-made millionaire and beauty CEO, who is an amazing person. I was very fortunate to see the documentary or the drama series about her that was on Netflix. So I was really pleased when I saw this because I thought she was an amazing woman. And I know it means a lot to Philippa that she wrote about us. So Philippa, hello.
Hello, Sue. Hello, community.
And just welcome back to talk about your article for the autumn edition. So what is it? Obviously, you knew we were doing Black History Month feature, and you chose to write about Sarah Breedlove, or what she also is known as is Madam C.J. Walker. So what is it about her that made you want to highlight her story?
For me, yes, we are like celebrating like Black History Month. I think people of any type of pioneering, trailblazing, change making, etc., we should be celebrating them on a daily basis. But in today's modern society, we kind of like box it into like certain segments of the year.
Indeed.
But Sarah Breedlove, otherwise known as Madam C.J. Walker, she really gifts us a lifetime of like life and business lessons that really we can choose to adopt or be enlightened by when we think about, like building our own businesses, or even like how we're showing up in life, in our community, in the world, etc. And for me, we look at, okay, she was the first self-made Black millionaire in 1917.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2025, 90% of the millionaires throughout the world are men.
Yeah.
Less than 10% are women, and less than 1% are women of colour.
Yeah.
And for me, my whole mission with regards to like business is about closing like the gender equality gap, but also like the wealth gap. And the way to like do that is through entrepreneurship. And although I work with like predominantly like women, but I do like work with like men as well, they've also like got a commitment to the He for She program, which is like done through United Women. And that really is about building businesses and workplace environments that are advancing women in different spaces, including entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And they are the male allies that, we do need. Not all of the time, but we do need. They do play an integral part of like shifting culture, whether it be within business, workplace, community, etc. And so for me, when I began writing this particular column, Sarah Breedlove for me was a real change maker in shifting gender equality in an environment and a time where there was lots of different things being done to eradicate women like Sarah Breedlove and her generation. I think about, well, what was it that really like drove her to be the success that she became? Because personal self-development and mindset
wasn't really a thing back then, was it? Tony Robbins wasn't there.
Exactly.
But what do you think it was that inspired her to? I mean, obviously she started on the, she was a laundress, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And she developed these products. But what do you think it was that kind of gave her that kick to make it, or even to begin that journey and, basically stick her fingers up at everybody? Because that's what she did, wasn't it? Just prove everybody wrong.
I think it was just that. I think it was the drive that her first sort of like experience of looking towards somebody else from her community that had like, you know, crafted success through, you know, natural hair care products herself, and wanting to like collaborate with them, and take this like message of like natural like hair care, etc., like forward. She got sidelined. She got, you know, self-esteem was like really kind of like hit. And even her agency to voice like this message and that things could change for women, even though they didn't have rights or the right to vote in that time, it didn't mean to say that they were any less worthy of creating their own economy, creating a space where they had agency. But her first interaction of like what we would say is a modern mentor was, no, you don't fit the mold.
No.
And I think it's that. And also her first experience with like her husband that you know, passed, was how he also like treated her, and it wasn't necessarily the best. And we could probably fit that into, you know, a toxic relationship. Wouldn't necessarily like say that it would be domestic violence, but it's bridging into that bucket.
Yeah.
And so I think for her, and in an environment, and you know, where things were happening on a daily basis to eradicate her and her kind, you had to really sort of like look within yourself and say, okay, well, what is it that I can do to change things? And I think that through the beauty sort of like business that she built was how she sort of like began to shift that message, but then also being able to like speak to the women that she was really, you know, treating like every day, and then also like developing a training school and amassed, can you imagine this, even in today's undertaking, amassed a sales force of 20,000 women.
I mean, it's
Across,
madness, isn't it?
I don't know whether I choose to like use the word madness, but
It's just
a real feat.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bit.
Feat.
I mean, even now, you know, we know how hard it is. You know, it's funny. I was just doing Phil Jackson's recording. We were talking about, you know, followers and whether they're of any value to you. And, you know, we know how hard we work to get followers in today's world. And mostly they don't interact with us that much. But she had 20,000 people without social media, that were out there promoting her business. And if we try and bring that into where we are today, I mean, you know, you're looking at the likes of Stephen Bartlett, at the likes of, I don't even know, who? They're like Microsoft and stuff, aren't you? You know, really, I mean, obviously Microsoft's probably a little bit out there and a little bit more advanced, but you know, we're looking at some of these like huge corporations. You know, in today's money, she probably would be a billionaire, wouldn't she?
She would be. If we equate it to UK, I was like doing some like research and sort of like looking for, okay, well, who was the first, you know, self-made female millionaire for the UK? And there isn't really like any sort of like information. However, it does state, okay, that Mary Perkins, Dame Mary Perkins, I think it is. So she is the co-founder of Specsavers. So not until 2015
Goodness me.
did she become the first self-made female billionaire for the UK. That in its own self speaks volumes.
Doesn't it just?
She had at the height of Specsavers, she had 900 different stores.
Yeah.
Can't remember the stats with regards to like how many people like worked for her, but it's on that same par and that same like level that like Sarah Breedlove was like doing a century before.
Yeah.
And I think when you are leading a business and you're clear about your vision, but also your mission.
Yeah.
And Sarah's mission really was about helping women come out of domestic labor, you know, earning like $1, you know, a day or less than often for many of them, but also giving them a space where they had economic power, which gave them choice, but they also had agency to say what was right and what was wrong, and challenge thinking or challenge perspectives, irrespective of the consequences that may come down the pipeline. And I think it was that really that helped her build a workforce and sale agency of like 20,000 women in a time such as we're talking about.
Yeah. And also, you know, like you think, I mean, I have no idea because this just come into my head. You know, you look at businesses like Avon, or even like one of the biggest modern counterparts, Tropic. And, you know, you look at those businesses and, you know, and Avon particularly, was that there when she started? Did she set the, like, you know, the ground for Avon to follow behind her? Or were they kind of, you know, already doing their thing and she was just, you know, running in parallel to them? Because it's, you know, what she did, you know, to have 20,000 people, it just is, it is mind-blowing that without any of the marketing opportunities that we now have, that she was able to do that, you know, a smaller population. There's so many things that make that be a standout moment. And that she also, you know, understanding, you know, for her, understanding her ideal client, you know, there was a whole ideal client, and much like it is today, you know, with melanin rich skin and textured hair, there is a massive client base there that is ignored and overlooked and not seen as having a requirement, or seen, you know, we know that there's billions of pounds being spent within the industry, within the retail sector particularly, on products for melanin rich and textured hair. And yet, you know, and this is something that, you know, that Sarah Breedlove picked up on and ran with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, through her own experience, and not oftentimes, you know, we begin businesses in the outset because of our own experience. Something has like been the catalyst that's like, okay, stepping out of, you know, working for somebody else and like building something that is meaningful for me and ourselves. And, you know, for Sarah, she, you know, had incredible issues with regards to like her scalp, and, you know, significant patches where like her hair had either sort of like receded or wasn't like growing, and she used to like hide it underneath like you know, bandana and like a cloth, and you know, thinking about being a laundress for like day in day out back in like the late 1800s, and like what they were sort of like using to, you know, wash clothes, and, you know, the constant steam, etc., played a massive part, I'm sure, with regards to like the loss of like her hair, and, you know, at that time struggling for it to like grow back. And, you know, when you speak to any sort of like woman of color and you talk to them about sort of like, oh, make sure that you're oiling your edges or you're oiling your scalp at night, stuff like that, it's not just about culture, it's a way of life, and it's protecting, you know, our own heritage. And I say that to say that even in the US, have you ever heard of the Crown Act?
No, I don't.
So in the US, they have what's known as the Crown Act. And let me just recite what it says so that I don't misquote it. So it's about being able to create respectful and an open world for natural hair. And basically what it means is if somebody is being race-based based on somebody's natural hair texture, etc., then that is found to be like illegal. And that's the US making a stand and an effort to acknowledge that, okay, back in their history of like slavery, when you were first captured as a slave or bought as a slave, one of the first things that was done was like the hair was shaved off, because that was a way of breaking that connection to culture, that connection to like lineage, that connection to heritage. And so therefore, you know, fast forward now into, you know, modern day like life. Yes, we have a wealth of women out there and men that are struggling with their self-image, their self-esteem, and the choices that they feel that they have in terms of like particular professionals that they can go to and that they can trust with regards to, you know, bringing their natural hair back to life, because it's part of identity. You know, I remember like my mum, many sort of like moons ago as a youngster, she didn't understand or take the time to really like learn about textured hair, and how to care for it, or I guess, you know, in South Devon and stuff like that, finding sort of like a hair specialist that like learned and knew how to like take care of like textured hair, etc., was probably few and far between.
Yeah.
And so she made her best efforts and steps, but every time I went to the hairdressers, I would cry, because
Yeah.
it was, I felt, even though I couldn't articulate it and really fully understand it at the time as a youngster, but I would cry because it was like, okay, well, you're cutting off my identity, but you're putting a bowl on the top of my head and then using the scissors to like cut round it and say to me that that's a haircut. You know, constantly thinning my hair, which is why I have the texture that I have now. And those things, they were integral to me as a person, and integral to any, you know, person of color when it comes to looking after like their skin and like looking after like their hair. They want to be able to like go to professionals that really understand them and really understand, you know, okay, what different appliances should be sort of like used, or, you know, drying my type of like hair with just a normal hairdryer and no diffuser is just a non-starter.
Yeah, that's it. And I know, and although I am not of melanin rich skin tone, I do have curly hair. We know I have curly hair. Yeah. I'm actually just about to start growing my fringe back down, actually. So I'm gonna have some curls back. But you know, I know, and we've had the conversation many times over the years about my hair, and you know, and I'm only a type 3 curl, but it can be truly horrendous trying to find. I mean, I have got an amazing hairdresser now who does understand my hair and really gets it. But even in that salon, I've gone through, there's been a few hairdressers that I've had that A, probably rapport wasn't there, but B, didn't get my hair. And when you find that person that understands your hair, you know, if you've got, you know, mousy brown straight hair that's like medium weight, you're laughing, really, because, you know, generally any hairdresser in the UK is going to be able to work with your hair. But once you get into curl, wave, anything else like that, it makes it really, really challenging. And I think, you know, this is one of the things that we wanted to kind of, that all of us that have been involved in the feature in this edition, is we want to raise awareness that actually not everybody's the same. And we have to have these, you know, what we do as an industry helps people. And I'm looking down at your article, and that quote that you had in there, like, Sarah understood something her competitor didn't, and she wasn't just selling natural hair care, she was selling confidence. And, you know, you saying, you know, that thing about being able to walk into an establishment and know you can trust that person is so important, because it is, you literally hand your confidence over to somebody when they're going to deal with your skin, when they're going to deal with your hair, because it is your identity, and it is so much more than just, you know, having hair that you just tie back and put out of the way. The level of care that needs to be taken of textured hair is so different. And it comes with so much more responsibility as a professional. And
absolutely,
we don't have that understanding currently in the UK.
There has been inroads, and but yeah, a full sort of like understanding of it isn't quite there. But where do we kind of sort of like bring that like conversation to? For me personally, it comes back to sort of like, you know, the ground roots of education. You know, it's set up in a particular way, and it kind of ticks a box of diversity, equality and inclusion, but it doesn't really fully appreciate black hair care, natural sort of like textures, all of like those sorts of important things in the way that it should. And you know, we look at, okay, normal sort of like school education and stuff like that. If Einstein was to like come back, you know, be resurrected and come back today, he'd go into university and nothing would be that much different, you know, from when he was like attending sort of like university, etc., in his lifetime. And the same can be said, I think, for not all, but a big portion of, you know, the hair care and beauty industry that is still kilted in historics and traditions that haven't evolved, haven't been innovative. Technology's been innovative, and what you can do with skin and hair has been to a degree innovative, but the foundations of it hasn't, in my perspective, and feel free to share and wade into the conversation, hasn't really shifted that much.
No, it hasn't. And I think, you know, I know, and I've expressed in the bits I've written for the feature, and I've also expressed on other conversations that people may have heard me having, is that, you know, one of the things that made me really very passionate about writing and getting everybody to kind of do this feature was that we sit as, you know, a woman, middle-aged white woman, I sit in a particular place, and, you know, the terms of like white privilege, I've had conversations around that, and I appreciate very much that I sit in a place where I don't necessarily understand, but I'm trying to make a difference. And part of what we're trying to do in the magazine is to just open those conversations and help people understand, you know, if you don't have a melanin rich skin and you don't have textured hair, you can't understand the perspective of the other person that does. And you can't understand the history that's brought them to their understanding of their world. So what we need to do is just try to be a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more understanding, and get our education makers to actually start changing the story. We've had the opportunity to change that story for the last few years with the updating of the National Occupational Standards, and they still are not up to date. Our education is still not being holistic and full. It's still being kiltered to white Caucasian, and whether that's in skin or whether that's in hair, we are still leaning heavily towards that, when we are moving in the next couple of decades to being a more heavily diverse population than white Caucasian. We are going to be beyond the 50% of and that's like, you know, globally, there is going to be more people of diverse background than there are white Caucasian. And we really, really need to understand that that needs to shift, and our education needs to be updated. And there's complexities around it, and there's hard conversations to be had. But I feel that, you know, hopefully with all of us starting to make those little changes, that maybe the doorway starts opening more, particularly in the UK industry.
For sure. And I think it's important that these are necessary conversations. And it's not a case of conversations that, okay, well, you're right and you're wrong. Conversation is about coming to a place of understanding and, you know, being inquisitive about, okay, well, what makes you have that perspective? What is it that I may be sort of like missing, or what is it that I need to sort of like learn? And I think it is important to frame these necessary conversations that will be challenging at times, maybe sometimes uncomfortable, but isn't that what growth is?
Yeah.
Don't we need to like experience those things to then move and shift and grow? Not all of the time, but the catalyst for, you know, change for lots of different people is, well, I don't want to settle for less, or, you know, I know that there's something better. When somebody's making a complaint about something, irrespective of whatever the environment is, it's because they have a belief that there is something better than what they're experiencing at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
It is important to have like these necessary conversations. And my column for this issue, albeit it's celebrating Black History Month, it is then bringing the conversation to the table.
Yeah.
and looking at a deeper perspective for you as an individual, as a business owner. Well, how do you, show up in your business to support women of color, or, diversity and equality and inclusion? What is it that you stand for when it comes to like those things? And, how do you impact your community in a positive way when it comes to those things? Or are you somebody at this moment in time that sits and looks on and watches other people do that type of work for the community? And that's not to say that, okay, yes, it shouldn't be okay that you just sit on the sideline and that's it, and that's where you forever ever stay. Don't get me wrong, there are going to be people in our worlds and communities that will do that.
Yeah.
But if you really are curious and you really want to upskill yourself and really start to think about, okay, well, what's the legacy that I am leaving behind me beyond my salon floor?
Yeah.
Then put yourself at the table, become part of the conversation. Even if you feel that you don't have something to offer, you do.
Yeah. And I think going through the last few months that I've gone through and working with so many women of colour, and whether that's women that are like would call themselves black, whether it's women that call themselves Asian, whether it's people that call themselves Southeast Asian, I've spoken to a very diverse group of women over the last few months. And the one thing I come back to all the time is that people just want to be heard. People want to be able to, and it isn't necessarily about, people like me going, oh yes, I'm listening and I'm going to try and do something, and I'm really going to listen and make sure I go and do good things. Because that, we've got to get beyond lip service. And I think that's the thing, is that there's been a lot of lip service. And I think we actually need to start just going, actually, let me hear things from your view. Let me try and understand, because what we have, and there's a reason it's called unconscious bias, is because you aren't necessarily aware of the fact that you're doing it. And I know I've had a few wake up moments over the last few months where, I mean, you and I have known each other for a really long time. And I'd like to think that I am welcoming of everybody. But I don't understand everybody. I think this is the thing, is that we don't understand. And I think that that's where the difficulty lies, is if we had a better understanding, even like you talking about the scalp issues and stuff. And one of the girls that wrote in our spotlight, Laurelyn Clinton, she's a scalp specialist. Now, to most non-hairdressers, but also to most white hairdressers, scalp issues that people with textured hair suffer from may not be something they understand, even know exists, unless they've served those clients or they've been taught that can happen. Yeah. So I think, there's all those questions, because I've got so many questions about it now, because I didn't, I've seen different things, and, you look at Will Smith's wife, and I know she's lost, she's suffered with a lot of hair loss. But unless you are in that community, you don't see it. So you don't know. Therefore, you can make faux pas, and you can say the wrong thing, and you can put yourself in a situation that you don't intend to, and you can make people feel uncomfortable without that intention. So I think, there's so much that we need to learn, and we can only do that through sharing our experiences and our knowledge from every community.
Absolutely. And you've got to be a person that is choosing to be at the place of like being open to the conversation. And we're always going to be like making faux pas about various like different things. That's what makes us human, but that's what also gives us the opportunity to be growing and evolving and becoming the best versions of ourselves. And I think that's why it's so important that we are, sharing like these incredible stories of these trailblazers that went before us and really carved the path for lots of us, but also recognize as well that, okay, am I somebody that is required to go first in this particular situation? And sometimes of like leaders, we are required to go first. Don't be frightened of that. Embrace it. Feel excited about, okay, well, what does the journey look like? How do I carve this, this path forward? And I've been there in like moments in my, career where I've gone first. It's been a requirement for me to go first. And, you know, in the initial moment when that realization sort of like comes, it's like, oh gosh, me? Really?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, now there's a responsibility and there's a stewardship to it.
Yeah.
And this is speaking from my perspective and how I perhaps influence like my clients when, you know, we're going through like coaching conversations and we are doing like work around like leadership, like development and things, you know, communication, etc. It is stewardship. It is about, okay, well, what you're saying or how you're framing it, how you're influencing like somebody, or how you're influencing your business, your community, your clients, etc. It's not just something that you just do. It's done with intention, and it's done with like, you know, like that long-term relationship building. And I think sometimes it's just important that when we're like sharing like these stories, an incredible wealth of, you know, inspiration and motivation there, that we go back and look at like our foundations. You know, well, how am I showing up as a leader?
Yeah.
You know, do I have opportunities that are requiring me to go first? Okay, maybe not now, but in the future, would I embrace it or would I shy away from it? And challenge the thinking and, you know, the stewardship of all of that around it, because again, that's what makes us grow. That's what helps move these conversations forward, but that's also like what helps, you know, shape things in the future. You know, when I sit in meetings at UN Women, and it's all about the advancement of women and girls worldwide and giving them like economic like freedom, let alone, you know, closing the gap on gender equality, and listening to like different like member states. There's a good intention, a real good intention to make headway and to make progress. But when it comes down to the voting and putting things in brass tacks into like legislation, it's totally different ball game. Yeah. And looking at the landscape at the moment, no, we're not sort of like going back to the times of slavery and, you know, I want to choose my words carefully here. We're not going backwards in terms of, okay, women losing the vote, but we are sliding back into a time where progress is actively being eradicated.
Yeah.
Where progress and the rights of women are actively being regressed or shortened, or the agency to be able to speak up and offer a perspective is actively being silenced through legal means, in corporate spaces. And so it is really sort of like, this isn't just about how you show up in your salon. It may be for some, but if you're really a values-driven entrepreneur and legacy is part of your value system, and for majority of my clients it is, then it's really understanding what are you stewarding and how are you stewarding it, and are you doing it with intention, or are you, you know, not even doing it at all?
Yeah.
And that's a bigger conversation.
Oh, isn't it just? We probably should leave it there on that cliff edge. But it is. But I do think that we seem to be on so many levels in this world at the moment on a precipice, and I think that, and I think to a degree it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. We all have an ability to make change. We all have a voice. We all have an option to do the right thing. And it doesn't matter whether that's doing the right thing in approaching a new type of client in your business, or a new type of service in your business, or whether you know, you're Donald Trump and you're trying to save the world. You know, we all have the option to do the right thing. And I think that that's kind of where I'd like to end it, because I think we need to just look at the fact that we all need to be responsible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for this conversation today.
That's okay. I'm enjoying these conversations this quarter, because I think there's going to be some good ones. And I think this is one of them. And it's just opening the doors. That's all it is. Just opening the doors and allowing people to step through.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I will see you for the next one.
My pleasure.